From Church Militant Studios, this is the Church Militant Evening News.
Hello, and thank you for joining us this Friday, March 17th. I'm James Speedowa, along with Hunter Bradford here with Catholic News and Context. Be sure to stick around right after evening news today for our analysis of the last 10 years of the Francis Pontificate. It's titled Decade of Disorientation, and we hope you'll take the time to watch it. And after this week's episode is this week's episode of Holy Mackerel. So lots of stuff to watch. Get your popcorn out, and that'll be awesome. But tonight, a deacon is going to prison after getting caught in a pedophile sting operation. The Pope has passed the buck on the question of ending priestly celibacy, and UK bishops are standing up against a new proposed bill.
Leading us off tonight, a prominent traditionalist bishop appears to be flirting with schismatic ideas. Bishop Athanasius Schneider, an auxiliary in Kazakhstan, said recently that the Society of St. Pius X isn't actually in schism. Priests should disobey the hierarchy and offer the traditional Latin Mass, and that Catholics should buy old church properties and set them up to offer the TLM. Earlier today, our founder, Michael Voris, sat down with apologist and podcast host Michael Lofton to get his response to Bishop Schneider.
Certainly dangerous to souls, absolutely, because what we're hearing is under the guise of an obedience to the faith, one is to disobey the hierarchy, and that's certainly problematic.
Interview with Michael Lofton about this topic live on YouTube earlier today. Be sure to check it out.
And a deacon in New York has recently been sentenced to over a decade and a half in prison after getting caught in a sting operation. 52-year-old deacon from the Diocese of Brooklyn, Rolio Vega, was sentenced to 16 years in prison on Wednesday in a federal court in Brooklyn. Deacon Vega was arrested back in January 2021 after making contact with a New York City policeman who Vega thought was a 14-year-old boy who wanted sex. Vega used the app Grindr. It's the same app La Crosse Diocese priest Monsignor Jeffrey Burrell used for gay sex a couple of years ago.
Lawmakers in Maryland are advancing a bill which would allow past victims of sex abuse to seek justice. Last night, Maryland State Senate overwhelmingly passed the Child Victims Act 42-5, aiming to remove the statute of limitations for abuse victims. The bill will now head to the state's House of Representatives, where iterations of the bill have seen wide support in the past. This, while any day now, the state attorney general is set to release a 456-page report on clergy sex abuse within the Archdiocese of Baltimore.
All week, we've been examining Pope Francis's pontificate from different angles and focusing on specific topics. But in tonight's in-depth report, Church Militant's Christine Chrisley looks at Pope Francis's track record on clergy sex abuse.
In March 2013, when Jorge Mario Bergoglio was elevated to the throne of St. Peter, clergy sex abuse victims were hopeful. Maybe this pope would be responsive to their cries for justice. Within a year, Francis appeared to be making moves in that direction. He established the Pontifical Commission for the Protection of Minors in March 2014 and named Boston's Cardinal Sean O'Malley, known as the sex abuse fixer, as president. 2 months later, he invited 6 sex abuse victims to the Vatican for a private audience. Things looked promising, except to sex abuse victims in Francis's home country of Argentina, where the Pope's record of protecting clergy sex abusers, particularly Father Julio Cesar Grassi, was making headlines. Grassi had established a network of orphan homes where he abused abandoned children. He was sentenced and convicted in 2008. But while the conviction was being appealed, Bergoglio commissioned an investigation and had its findings in support of Grassi distributed to higher court judges. When questioned by a French journalist in 2016, the Pope denied his not-so-subtle effort to influence the proceedings.
Su Santidad, en el caso Grassi, ha intentado influir la justicia argentina? ¿No? Perché pidió este estudio en el caso Gracia? Para nada.
Then in 2018, the summer of shame, the world learned one of the church's most powerful cardinals, Theodore McCarrick, was a sex abuser. And both Francis and his sex abuse fixer, Sean O'Malley, had known about McCarrick, but kept quiet. When questioned by journalists about how much he knew in this matter, Francis refused to answer.
Read the document carefully and judge it for yourselves. I will not say one word on this.
In the 10 years of Francis's pontificate, he's shown if he can't deny, ignore, or diminish the extent of clergy sex abuse, he'll just lie about it.
Since he left Argentina in 2013, Pope Francis has never returned to his home country. Some believe it's because he will not be well received. And here with more insight on the Pope's record on clergy sex abuse is our own Christine Chrislieb. So, Christine, what are people on the ground saying about Francis's support for sex abuse victims and their families?
James, I had the opportunity this morning to talk with Mitchell Garabedian, the plaintiff's lawyer made famous in the Academy Award-winning movie Spotlight, who over the last 3 decades he's represented hundreds of sex abuse victims. He's battled the Vatican through 3 pontificates, John Paul II, Benedict, and now Pope Francis. I asked him, when Pope Francis publicly claimed zero tolerance for clergy sex abuse, what do you think he meant?
Well, I think Pope Francis is using a lot of words and using vos estes and talking about clergy sexual abuse as spin control. He's covering up the clergy sexual abuse crisis. He's basically covering up the cover-up.
Christina, Mr. Garabedian mentioned vos estes. Could you tell us more about that?
Sure. In May of 2019, Pope Francis issued a motu proprio, an edict, to the church about clergy sex abuse. It was called Vos Estis Lux Mundi. Garabedian is saying that this formal statement on the problem is all form and no substance. It's window dressing, and it doesn't seriously address the problem. Here's what he went on to say specifically about Vos Estis.
And unfortunately, his thoughts, his concerns, his suggestions don't have any teeth. It's business as usual within the Catholic Church. He's trying to say the right things for spin control, for publicity purposes, but it's basically a moral failure.
I also asked Mr. Garabedian about Cardinal Sean O'Malley, who's president of the Pontifical Commission for the Protection of Minors. These 2 men, both based in Boston, have known each other for years. When the Boston Globe published its Spotlight report on clergy sex abuse in 2002, Cardinal Law was Archbishop of Boston. O'Malley replaced Law and then was made president of the Pontifical Commission. In the United States, there is no clergyman more informed about clergy sex abuse than Cardinal O'Malley. Here are Garabedian's thoughts about O'Malley.
Well, Sean O'Malley is part of the problem. You know, he at one point had proposed that parishes implement programs for the safety and protection of children, but then those programs were only they were voluntary. In other words, the parish did not have to implement those programs. So it's more of the same. It mirrors what Pope Francis is doing.
Yeah, we know that O'Malley received a letter, claims he didn't receive it, but the letter that he was sent, at least, regarding McCarrick, and of course didn't do anything to deny that he knew about McCarrick.
Correct.
And all that. But Christine, thank you for this report. It's wrapping up our series on Pope Francis's pontificate, so hopefully we will have you on again soon.
Oh, thanks. My pleasure, James.
God bless, Christine.
Thank you, James and Christine. In Rome, Pope Francis is sowing confusion on a wholly debated issue on the church again. In an interview published last week, the pontiff addressed the topic of priestly celibacy in the Western Church, noting the tradition may not stand. The Pope wrote, "Today it's the case, and tomorrow it may no longer be. We'll see that the time will come when a Pope perhaps will revisit it." Perhaps. This while members of the German Church's errant synodal way have been clamoring for an end to priestly celibacy, among other things.
The Synod of Bishops Secretary General, Cardinal Mario Grech, has named an American prelate to an influential committee. Grech announced Wednesday Bishop Daniel Flores of Brownsville, Texas, will serve on a preparatory commission ahead of the Vatican Synod on Synodality in October. Flores and 6 others will meet to explore, quote, the theme and for the redaction of any documents that may be issued prior to the Synod assembly. The Board of Bishops is a huge proponent of illegal immigration, even previously comparing the deportation of illegals to abortion.
After Britain's House of Commons recently approved legislation to ban prayer outside of abortion mills, Catholic bishops in the UK are condemning the new law. On Wednesday, the head bishop of the Catholic Bishops' Conference of England and Wales on life issues, Bishop John Sherrington, put out a statement saying, "We lament that prayer, holding certain views, or peacefully witnessing to the gospel of life in certain zones across these lands may now be a criminal offense." A priest named Father Sean Goff was arrested in Birmingham, England this past February for the same kind of law.
I never imagined I could be considered a criminal for praying silently near an abortion facility. My prayer was for free speech. For praying in silence, I allegedly ran afoul of a local censorship zone and was charged as a criminal.
And over in Austria, police in Vienna announced they are beefing up security. On Wednesday, the Vienna police Twitter account wrote, "Our intelligence services have reason to believe that an assault with an Islamistic motive is planned to be carried out in Vienna." The police further clarified that this warning does not apply to Christian churches exclusively, but, quote, houses of worship of various confessions. The next day, police tweeted out, "The most recent assessment by our intelligence services concerning a possible security threat in the city of Vienna concluded that our enhanced security measures can be reduced gradually." The police have not reported any incidents or arrests in regard to this. But when we come back, the governor of this state takes a strong stand against abortion pills, and a Canadian pastor gets arrested for trying to stop kids getting groomed. Stay tuned to all that and more up next.
Thank you for watching the first half of Church Militant Evening News.
If you would like to watch the rest of today's episode, please click the link in the description, and we'll see you at churchmilitant.com. God love you.